The year was 1876, or near enough to make no difference in the high, dry air of Wyoming Territory. The wind never truly stopped in Ash Hollow. It was a mean wind, carrying red dust that coated every window ledge and grit that settled in the bottom of every tin coffee cup. It was the kind of wind that frayed nerves and whispered bad news long before a man on horseback ever brought it. The wind worried the edges of a wanted poster nailed to the sheriff's office. The paper flapped, a weak imitation of a wing beat. From the rimrock above the town, Chayton watched that poster. He knew the name on it, though he did not need to read the words. He knew the bounty, $500. He knew the charged destruction of railroad property. He knew the man accused, because the man was him. He was a man of the Taltsoni, but he wore the rough-spun trousers and wool shirt of the town. His hair was long, bound at the nape of his neck, a compromise. He lived in the space between the sacred lands of his people and the muddy, ambitious streets of the miners. His gaze drifted past the town, past the raw scar of the new mine head, to the deep cleft in the mountains beyond, the Crescent Valley, his home, his purpose. He was its guardian, and the wind tasted like iron and smoke. He moved without a sound, his feet finding purchase on the rock as if he were part of it, his eyes missing nothing. The new telegraph wires strung alongside the railroad tracks hummed with a tension that matched his own. The world of the white man was loud, and it was hungry. Down in the one-room schoolhouse, the temporary teacher, Miss Eliza Hart, dismissed the handful of children. She smiled, a pinched, polite expression that did not reach her eyes. She was small, neat, and wore a gray dress buttoned high to her throat. She looked exactly like what she claimed to be a woman waiting for the next stagecoach east, earning her keep by teaching letters. She was a lie. Eliza Hart was a surveyor. She was a cartographer, and she had, for a brief, regrettable time, worked in an office for the Pinkerton Agency, learning how men in expensive suits used lines on paper to steal worlds. When the last child, a miner's boy with a cough, had gone, her entire posture changed, the mildness evaporated. She locked the door. From a false bottom in her trunk, beneath the few books and spare linens, she retrieved her true tools, not a slate and chalk, but a brass transit, a Gunter's chain, and her meticulous ledgers. Her goal was not to teach sums. Her goal was to unravel the precise, legalistic theft of the Crescent Valley by the Ash Hollow Mining and Rail Company. Silas Bixby, the company's owner, was a man she had never met, but she knew the shape of his greed. It was mapped in the false survey markers she had found, moved 20 degrees south of the legal boundary line set by the old treaty. She was here to expose him. She was here to fix what she had broken, back when she drew maps for men whose intentions she had been paid not to question. The guilt of that time was a stone in her gut, heavier than the surveying equipment she kept hidden. As the sun bled out behind the peaks, the heart of Ash Hollow began to beat. The Copper Daisy Saloon was the only place in town that washed away the day's red dust with amber whiskey. Aunt Ada, a woman built wide and solid as the bar she polished, served drinks and collected information. The saloon was the town's true hub, more so than the church or the sheriff's office. Sheriff Crowley was there, his boots on a table, his badge reflecting the lamplight. He was Bixby's man, bought and paid for. His presence ensured the talk never got too loud. Just worried. He was flanked by 2 men from the Black Spur outfit, mercenaries Bixby kept on his payroll. They wore new pistols and drank with an arrogance that chafed the regulars. "Gold price is up," a prospector muttered into his glass. "Another 10%. They say Bixby opens that new vein. We all eat." "Eat what?" a cattleman retorted. His face weathered. "His dust. That railroad is spooking my herds, and his Black Spur boys are running roughshod over grazing land." "It is progress," the prospector insisted, glancing at Crowley. "We need stability. We need the law." "That ain't law," the cattleman said, quiet. "That's just Bixby." Aunt Ada just polished. She heard it all. The town was splitting. They wanted the stability and coin the mine promised. They wanted the conveniences of the railroad, but that stability came at a cost. And the cost was the land promised to the Taltsoni by a treaty not yet 20 years old. It was order against justice. The warm hearth of the saloon, the bright notes from the piano player in the corner, could not mask the chill of that equation. Into the low murmur of the saloon walked Elder Red Elk. He was old, his face a map of the very land they argued over. He did not come to drink. He stood by the door, his blanket draped over one shoulder, and the room quieted. "The wind carries warnings," he said, his voice quiet but carrying over the clink of glass. "The creeks run thin. The moon will hide her face. You dig in the earth. You anger the spirits that sleep there. You break the treaty. You break the world." Sheriff Crowley laughed. A short, ugly bark. He swung his boots off the table. "Go home, old man. This is white man's business now. We got a new treaty coming. A better one. Progress." Red Elk looked at him, his eyes holding no fear, only a deep, ancient pity. "Progress," he repeated. "That is the word you use for theft. You build your house on sand, Sheriff. The wind will remember." He turned and left. The silence he left behind was heavier than the one he had entered. Even the piano player, a man accustomed to playing through gunfire, paused his tune. Later that night, long after the Copper Daisy had closed and the only sound was the howling wind, Eliza Hart worked by the light of a single, shielded candle. Her maps were spread on the floor. They were weapons. She knew it. Paper and ink. They were the only weapons she knew how to use, and they were more powerful than a rifle in the right hands, or the wrong ones. She unrolled one map, a survey of the disputed boundary, but she was not looking at the topography. In the margins, written in a tiny, precise script that filled every available white space, was a transcription. She had been in the land office in Cheyenne, posing as a clerk. 2 weeks prior, she had been tasked with filing correspondence. She had sharp hearing and a memory trained for detail. She had overheard Bixby's lawyer speaking to a man from the territorial government, a man whose name made her hand tremble even now. She dipped her pen and continued writing on the map's border, the words wrapping around the drawing of the Crescent Valley. "And payment of $5,000 to ensure the treaty is ratified by the Commission. Oh, Crowley to enforce the exclusion zone effective immediately upon signing. And an additional $2,000 for the disappearance of any resistance, specifically the tracker Chayton." It was a confession in another man's voice. She wrote it all down, her hand cramping. This ledger, this map, was the proof. It was leverage. It was dynamite. Eliza Hart trusted no one. Not the miners who wanted gold, not the ranchers who wanted grass, not the sheriff who wanted Bixby's money, and certainly not the Taltsoni warrior she had seen watching the town from the rocks. He was a complication she could not afford. Another piece on a board she did not control. She blotted the ink, the paper absorbing the black lines. The map had become a time bomb. She rolled it carefully, hiding the lawyer's bribe inside the geography of the land he meant to steal. She slid it back into the false bottom of her trunk, beneath the disguise of the simple schoolteacher. The wind rattled the window frame, trying to get in. Eliza Hart knew she could not wait. The information in her ledger was volatile. She needed to verify the old boundary markers herself, the ones the Treaty of 1858 had established. She hired a simple buckboard and a quiet driver from the livery, a young man named Clem, paying him $2 for the day. She loaded her trunk, heavy with the hidden weight of her transit and chain, claiming she was taking the schoolchildren on a geological hunt. The lie felt flimsy, but Clem was more interested in the silver in his hand than the stories of a temporary schoolteacher. They headed west, toward the cleft in the hills known as Split Rock Canyon. It was a known shortcut to the high grazing land, a jagged scar in the red rock, barely wide enough for a single wagon. The air grew still, the heat pressing down. The horses became nervous, their ears flicking. "I do not like this place, Miss," Clem said, his knuckles white on the reins. "Feels watchful." Before Eliza could answer, the world exploded in sound. 3 riders burst from a cut in the rock ahead, and 2 more from behind. They were not soldiers. They were hard men, unshaven, wearing the black dusters of the Black Spur outfit. Their rifles were level. "Stop the wagon," a man with a thick, scarred neck ordered. Clem yanked the reins. "The horse is rearing. Get down, both of you." Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained calm, adopting the mask of a frightened but indignant teacher. "What is the meaning of this? We are on a school outing." The scarred man spat in the dust. He dismounted and walked toward her. "Save it, lady. We know what you are, and we know what you have. Bixby wants his map." "I do not know any Mr. Bixby," Eliza lied, her hands clasped tightly. "And I have no map, only children's books." "A map," the man insisted, his patience snapping. "The one showing the underground river. The water Bixby needs for the sluice. Hand it over." Eliza's blood ran cold. An underground river, her maps showed topography, boundaries, elevations. She knew nothing of a subterranean river. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Then we look." He signaled his men. They descended on the buckboard like wolves. They ripped open her traveling bags, scattering clothes and books onto the canyon floor. Clem was held at gunpoint, his eyes wide with terror. "It is not here, boss," one man yelled. "Check the trunk," the scarred man ordered, his eyes never leaving Eliza. They smashed the lock on her school trunk. Chalk, slates, and readers tumbled out. Then one man grunted, finding the false bottom. He ripped it open. The brass gleam of her transit shone in the sun. Her meticulously rolled maps, her chain, her measuring tools. The scarred man grinned. A terrible sight. "A teacher. You looks like you brought the wrong tools for teaching letters. Miss Hart." He grabbed her main map case. "This will do." A sound cracked through the canyon. It was not a pistol shot. It was the sharp, heavy report of a buffalo rifle, fired from high above. Splinters exploded from the wagon's front wheel, inches from the scarred man's head. "Ambush!" one of the riders yelled, wheeling his horse. They drew their weapons, their eyes scanning the high rims of the canyon. They saw nothing, only shadow and rock. Another shot. This one struck the metal binding of the trunk, screaming as it ricocheted. The sound echoed, making it seem as if they were surrounded. "It is him," another rider yelled, his voice strained. "It is that damn Tulsoni tracker, the $500 ghost." The scarred leader cursed, looking at the map case in his hand, then up at the rocks where the unseen shooter hid. He weighed the value of the maps against the cost of a fight with Chayton. "It is not worth the blood," he snarled. "We got papers. Let's go." He spurred his horse, and the Black Spur men vanished as quickly as they had appeared, thundering down the canyon, taking her maps with them. Silence returned, heavier this time, broken only by Clem's ragged breathing. "You can go," a new voice said. Eliza spun. He was not there a second ago. He stood 20 feet away, having emerged from the rock itself. It seemed he was tall, built of lean muscle, his movements fluid. He held his rifle low, his eyes fixed on Clem. He was the man from the wanted poster. "Go!" Chayton said again. Clem did not need to be told a third time. He scrambled onto the buckboard, wheeled the horses, and fled back toward Ash Hollow, leaving Eliza alone with the warrior and the wreckage of her equipment. She stood straight, refusing to show fear, though her knees were shaking. "You are Chayton." "You are the map woman," he countered, ignoring her statement. He walked toward the mess, his eyes taking in the broken transit, the scattered tools. "You are not a teacher." "No," Eliza said, her voice tight. She bent to retrieve what she could, her hands angry. "I am not." "They took your maps," he observed. "They took the wrong maps." She snapped, more to herself than to him. "They took my surveys, not the proof." She found her personal ledger, the one with the transcribed bribes, lying in the dust. Chayton saw it at the same time. He moved faster, his hand closing over the leather-bound book. He flipped it open. He could not read the English script, but he recognized something else. In the margins, where she had practiced the language, were Taltsoni words. He looked at her, his suspicion hardening. "You work for Bixby. You map the land. You learn the words. A spy." "No." She faced him squarely. "I work for myself." He held the book, his thumb tracing the shape of a word. Peace. Before he could question her further, she spoke, her voice clear and her pronunciation careful. "Da yish. Leave it." He froze. His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The fear was gone, replaced by a steel resolve he recognized. He spoke slowly, his English precise. "Where did a woman who draws lines learn the people's tongue?" "In Missouri," she said, her voice steady. "In a hospital in St. Louis 2 years ago. There was a Taltsoni woman there. Her name was Willow Basket. She was sick. No one could speak to her. I sat with her. She taught me words. Water, sleep, pain, peace." He held her gaze. He was searching for the lie. He found none. He looked down at the book, then handed it back to her. He had made a decision. He helped her salvage what was left. It was not much, but as she gathered the remnants of her tools, she found the one thing the black spur had missed, tucked inside her bedroll. It was her copy of the original, 1858 treaty. "This is what matters," she said, holding the folded paper. "And this," she tapped the ledger. "I have the old lines. I have the proof Bixby moved the markers." She drew a line in the dust with her boot. "The treaty line is here. His new railroad stakes are 1/2 mile south, deep inside your valley." Chayton stared at the line in the dust. He had known Bixby was stealing. He had felt it. But this woman, this stranger, held the white man's paper that proved it. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke and the distant clang of a hammer. Chayton moved to the edge of the canyon, his eyes fixed on Ash Hollow below. Eliza followed. They watched as Sheriff Crowley, flanked by 2 black spurmen, nailed a large white decree to the front of the courthouse. A small crowd was gathering, reading it. "The new treaty," Chayton said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, which was more terrifying than rage. Bixby's paper. He did not wait. "What does it say?" Eliza whispered. "It says the Taltsoni must move," Chayton replied. "We must be clear of the Crescent Valley for the railroad's expansion. We have 3 days, 72 hours. Then he will send Crowley and the Black Spur to enforce the resettlement." Eliza looked at the official paper, then at the man beside her. The deadline was no longer theoretical. It was here. Chayton turned his back to the town and looked west, toward the peaks that guarded the Crescent Valley. "My father is buried in that valley," he said, his voice quiet. "His father sleeps under the same soil. I swore on my father's grave that the railroad would not dig up his bones. I will not be the son who breaks that vow." Eliza secured her ledger and the old treaty in her ruined bag. She thought of the maps she had drawn in Nebraska, the neat lines that had displaced the Ponca, the guilt she had carried east. "I drew maps for men like Bixby once," she said. "I told myself it was just geometry, that the lines on the paper did not matter. I was wrong. I will not be wrong again. I will see him stopped." Chayton looked at her. "You will be dead before you reach the courthouse." "Then I will be dead," she said. The sky, which had been a clear, harsh blue, was turning a sickly yellow. The wind was rising, picking up dust, not in gusts, but in a steady, building wave. "A storm," Chayton said, reading the air. "A bad one. We cannot stay here. We cannot go to the town." "Where do we go?" "Follow me." He started moving, not running, but covering ground with a long, certain stride. "We will hide the maps. We will hide you. In the morning, You will take the first stage east. I am not leaving, she said, hurrying to keep up. First, he said, not looking back. We survive the wind. He led her not toward the valley, but deeper into the rock formations, to a dark fissure Eliza would never have seen. It was a shallow cave, eroded by ancient water, the air inside sharp with the smell of mineral salt. They scrambled inside just as the world outside vanished. The sandstorm hit the canyon with a physical roar. It was not a sound, it was a weight, a physical pressure that seemed to stop her breath. The wind howled, a symphony of rage, the sand hitting the cliff face like millions of tiny bullets. Eliza pressed herself against the back wall, covering her ears, her eyes squeezed shut. This was beyond her experience. It was elemental fury. She felt the rock vibrate. A primal panic seized her, tightening her chest. She was shaking. Chayton sat near the mouth of the cave, his rifle across his knees. He was perfectly still, watching the wall of red dust as if it were merely a changing season. He saw her terror. He saw the way she fought for breath. He did not move toward her. He did not offer empty words. He simply turned his head slightly, his gaze on the storm, and he began to sing. It was not loud, it was a low, quiet chant, a Taltsoni lullaby. The melody was simple, rhythmic, rising and falling like a slow breath. It was a song about the rock being a safe house, about the wind being a brother who was angry but would soon sleep. His voice did not fight the storm. It wove itself into the chaos, creating a small, safe space in the center of the noise. Eliza opened her eyes. The roar was still deafening, but the song was closer. It was a single, steady thread of human peace. Her breathing began to slow, her shoulders unknotted. She watched the man wanted for violence, the warrior with the $500 bounty on his head, and his voice was the only thing in the world that felt safe. The wind died just before dawn, leaving the world scoured and still. The air in the salt cave was stale. Chayton was already awake, standing at the mouth of the fissure, breathing in the new, clean air. Eliza stirred, stiff and sore, the grit of the storm coating her skin and clothes. The storm has passed, he said. He did not look at her. What now? She asked, her voice raspy. Now, I see to my people. You see to yours. He turned his head. His gaze was hard. The town is not safe for you. Bixby's men will be looking. They know who you are. I have to go back, she said, gathering her ruined bag and the precious ledger. I have to know what happened. Then go, he said, but do not be seen. He stepped out of the cave and vanished. It was not a fast movement. He simply blended with the rock and was gone. Eliza was alone. She took the long way, circling south of the main road, using the gullies and washes for cover. The red dust of the storm lay thick on everything, muffling her footsteps. Ash Hollow looked exhausted, as if it, too, had been hiding from the wind. She came up the alley behind the main street. The quiet was wrong. It was a sour, tense silence. She saw the Copper Daisy Saloon first. The bat-wing doors were not just closed. They were broken, one hanging from a single leather hinge. Splintered wood littered the boardwalk. Her heart seized. She ran the last few feet, ignoring Chayton's warning. The inside of the saloon was a wreck. Tables were overturned. Chairs were smashed. The floor was a glittering, sticky mess of broken glass and spilled whiskey. Aunt Ada, Eliza called, her voice small in the large, ruined room. A groan came from behind the bar. Eliza scrambled over the wreckage. Aunt Ada was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, a bloody rag pressed to her cheek. Her eye was swollen shut, and a dark, ugly bruise was spreading across her face. "Child," Ada breathed, her voice thick. "You are a fool for coming here." Who did this? Eliza's hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, precise rage. Who do you think? Ada winced as she tried to shift. The black spur, They came at first light, kicked the door in before I had the coffee on. They were looking for you." Eliza knelt beside her. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I had not seen you," Ada said, her one good eye sharp. "Told them you were just a teacher, and you probably ran when the wind picked up." The one with the scarred neck. He did not like that answer. He said I was lying, said I was hiding a railroad spy. "This is my fault," Eliza whispered, the guilt a physical weight in her chest. "No." Aunt Ada reached out and gripped Eliza's arm with surprising strength. "This is Silas Bixby's fault. This is greed's fault. Now get up, get out of sight. They are angry. They missed you in the canyon, and they are tearing the town apart to find you." A noise from the street stopped them both. A man's voice, raised in official proclamation. "Sheriff Crowley." Eliza crawled to the broken window, peering through the splinters. Crowley was in the middle of the street, his pistol drawn. He was not alone. He had 6 black spurmen with him, and they were dragging Elder Red Elk by the arms. The old man was bound, but he walked with his head high. "This is what happens to agitators," Crowley shouted to the small, fearful crowd that had gathered. "The blacksmith, the storekeep, 2 miners. This man," he shoved Red Elk forward, "has been inciting his people to violence. He has been preaching resistance to the new treaty, resisting progress." Red Elk looked at Crowley. "You cannot make a new treaty to steal what an old treaty protects. The paper does not make the theft holy." "Shut up, old man!" Crowley hit him across the face. Eliza flinched as if she had been struck herself. "We are gonna have a trial," Crowley announced to the town. "A public hearing, all nice and legal. Judge Vaughn is on his way. We will try this one for sedition, and we will finalize the resettlement order. Silas Bixby's patience is finished. 2 days. You all hear me, 2 days." He dragged Red Elk to the small stone jail, threw him inside, and slammed the heavy barred door. The sound of the key turning in the lock was loud in the morning air. Eliza pulled back into the shadows of the ruined saloon. 2 days. The 72-hour notice Chayton had seen was not just a threat. It was a summons. Bixby was not just going to take the land. He was going to have a court declare it his. He was wrapping his crime in the flag and the law. "The new treaty," Eliza said, her mind racing. "The one he nailed to the courthouse. What about it?" Aunt Ada said, pushing herself up with a grunt. "I have to see it. I have to see the signature." "You are crazy, girl. You walk out there. Crowley will have you in the cell next to Red Elk." "Not if I do not walk out there." Eliza dug in her bag. Her transit was broken. Her chain was gone, but her spyglass, a small brass one she used for long-distance sighting, was intact. She moved to the darkest part of the saloon, positioning herself where she could see the courthouse door through the window. The white paper was still nailed to it. She extended the spyglass and braced it on the splintered frame. She focused the lens. The text was large, handwritten. She read the words. "By order of the Territorial Commission. Immediate relocation of all non-designated persons. Sovereignty of the Ash Hollow Mining and Rail Company." She moved the glass to the bottom. The signatures. The territorial governor. A commissioner. And the circuit judge. Judge Alistair Vaughn. Eliza's breath hitched. She lowered the spyglass and fumbled for her own ledger. She flipped past the notes on Bixby's lawyer, past the Tultsoni words, to the last pages. During her time in the Pinkerton office, she had been meticulous. She had copied files, correspondence, land deeds. She had practiced the signatures of powerful men, a strange hobby born of caution. She knew what their handwriting looked like. She found the page, Vaughn, a copy of his signature from a deed filed 1 year ago. She raised the spyglass again. She looked at the signature on the treaty. She looked at the signature in her book. The V was too narrow, the A was too rigid, and the flourish on the N was all wrong. It was close. It was a very, very good imitation. But it was not his. "It is a forgery," she whispered, the word striking her with the force of a physical blow. Aunt Ada, the treaty, it is a fake. Bixby faked the entire document. This changed everything. He did not have a legal claim. He had a lie written on expensive paper. But if this is fake, Eliza thought aloud, where is the real treaty, the one from 1858? And where is Bixby's real ledger, the one that proves the bribes I wrote down? A man like Bixby, obsessed with control, would not leave those things in a town office, not in a bank. He would keep them close. The train, she said, the realization hitting her. He runs his whole company from that private car, the Black Mary. It is his office, his fortress. It runs every night to the new minehead, payroll, supplies, and his safe. Aunt Ada nodded slowly, her good eye wide. He trusts no one but himself and that steel box. It is guarded by black spur men every night, leaves at 10. If we are going to stop this, Eliza said, her mind made up, we have to get what is in that safe. We have to get the real treaty, and we have to get his real books. It is the only way. She helped Aunt Ada into a back room, barred the door, and slipped out of the saloon. She moved like a ghost, back to the rimrock, back to the high ground. She gave the 3-note bird call Chayton had taught her. He was there in an instant, his rifle in his hands. What? She told him, the raid, Aunt Ada's beating, the arrest of Elder Red Elk. His face turned to granite. He put his hands on an elder. The time for your paper games is over. His voice was low, lethal. I will gather the warriors. We will take the jail. We will free Red Elk, and we will burn the courthouse to the ground. No. Eliza grabbed his arm, and he stopped, surprised by her touch. If you do that, you prove Bixby right. You become the savage he tells everyone you are. He will bring in the army, and you will lose the valley forever. This is not a war you can win with rifles. We are already losing, he snarled, pulling his arm away. Your law is a white man's trick. Red Elk sits in that cage because of your law. He sits in that cage because of a lie, she shot back, her voice ringing with a new, hard authority. The treaty Crowley nailed up is a forgery. I can prove it. The judge's signature is fake. He froze. This was not what he had expected. What does this mean? It means Bixby has no legal right. It means the old treaty, the one that protects your valley, is still the only law. But he has it. He has it locked in his safe, on his private train, along with the ledgers that prove he bribed the territorial officials to look the other way. Chayton stared at her, the wind whipping his long hair. You want to raid a moving train? Steal paper from an iron box? I want to win, she said, her eyes locked on his. If we get those documents, Chayton, we do not just save Red Elk, we save the Crescent Valley. We expose Bixby in front of the whole town. We use the white man's law to hang the white man. We beat him with his own rules. The war inside him was plain on his face. The warrior who demanded immediate action, fought with the strategist, who saw the wisdom in her words. He wanted vengeance for Red Elk. He wanted blood for Aunt Ada. But she was offering him justice. It is a fool's plan, he said quietly. It is the only plan, she insisted. Fight him in the street, and you bleed. Fight him in the courthouse with the truth. And he bleeds. He turned away from her, looking down at the small, arrogant town. He looked at the jail. He looked at the railroad tracks, the iron scar on the land. A two-knife approach, he said at last. That is what my father would call it. We will try your way. We will go for your papers. He turned back to her, and his eyes were cold fire. But we will be ready. If your plan fails, if the shadows betray us, we do it my way. I will have my warriors ready. We will not let them take our elder. Agreed, Eliza said, her heart pounding. The sun was sinking, painting the western sky in colors of blood and fire. The air grew cold. Chayton moved to a high point on the ridge, overlooking the valley. He gathered dry tinder and built a small, tight fire. He struck a match and let the flames catch, burning bright for a moment. Then he took a damp horse blanket, one he had cached in the rocks, and smothered the fire. A thick plume of white smoke rose straight up in the still evening air. He pulled the blanket away. He covered the fire again. 1 puff, 2, 3. A long pause. Then 1 short puff. He was speaking to the hills. Eliza watched, holding her breath. The silence of the high desert seemed to complete. Then, miles away, on the darkest ridge of the Crescent Valley, a single light flared. It winked once, twice. Then it was gone. The Taltsoni had seen, they had answered. Chayton kicked the dirt over his fire, scattering the embers until nothing remained. "They know," he said. "They have the news. They know about Red Elk. They know we are moving against the Iron Horse." He looked at Eliza, the last light of the day carving his face from shadow. "The new moon is tomorrow night, a night with no eyes. It will open the path." The new moon was a sliver of blindness in the sky, offering no light. The night was close, the air heavy with the promise of change. They had one day. Chayton moved through the darkness of Ash Hollow as if he were part of it. Eliza followed, her steps light, her senses screaming. He led her to the edge of the town, where the ring of hammers usually sounded. The blacksmith forge was dark, but a faint line of red light glowed under the heavy door. Chayton gave a low, two-toned whistle. The door opened a crack. Mara was a woman built of muscle and sinew, her arms thick from the hammer. Her black hair was tied back in a practical braid, her face smudged with soot. She was of Mexican origin, a refugee from the troubles to the south, and she trusted no one but Aunt Ada and her own anvil. She looked at Chayton, then her dark eyes settled on Eliza. "This is the map woman." Chayton said, "I know who she is," Mara said, her voice low. "Get in. The air has eyes tonight." They slipped inside. The forge was hot, the smell of coal and hot iron filling the space. A third man was there, sitting in the shadows, sharpening a long knife. He was Taltsoni. He was young, his face sharp and restless. "2 moons," Chayton said, gesturing to him. "He sees what others miss." 2 moons looked at Eliza and said nothing. His gaze was not hostile, just cold. He was a scout, a man who lived on the edges. "Show her," Chayton said to Eliza. Eliza did not waste time. She unrolled her diagrams on the flat top of the anvil. One was a schematic of the rail line where it cut through the high rocks. The other was a detailed sketch of Bixby's private car, the Black Mary, drawn from memory and 2 days of careful observation. "He runs his business from this car," Eliza explained, her finger tracing the lines. "It is an office. It is armored steel. There are 2 guards, black spurmen, inside the car at all times, 2 more on the platform between the cars. They change shifts every 2 hours. She pointed to a small square she had drawn near the car's center. "The safe. I saw them loading it. It is a Kresge Model 4. We cannot blow it. The sound would bring the whole town." Mara looked at the drawing, a look of professional contempt on her face. "Kresge," she scoffed. "A tin box with a fancy lock. They rust from the inside. It is not made for this dry air. It is made for damp city offices." 2 moons tapped the diagram. "Dynamite, at the axle. We break the car. We take the box." "And they hunt us to the end of the earth," Chayton said, his voice flat. "This is not a raid. 2 moons. It is surgery. We take what we need. They do not know we were there until it is too late." "So, the lock?" Eliza asked Mara. Mara shook her head. "The lock is a waste of time. Too many tumblers. But the hinges—" She grinned, a flash of white teeth in the grime. "The hinges are external. The pins are steel. But the box is iron. Iron cracks. Steel does not." She picked up a heavy piece of chalk and began to draw on the forge floor. "I will make you a spreader, a wedge and a lever. You will not pick the lock. You will pull the door from the frame." "How long?" Chayton asked. 2 hours, Mara said, turning to the fire. "It needs to be hardened, quenched in my own mix. It will be stronger than his tin box." Good, Chayton said. 2 moons. You will watch the tracks. From the high cut, you will signal us when the train leaves the yard. 2 moons nodded, sliding his knife back into its sheath. He looked at Chayton. While we play with tools, Red Elk sits in a cage. The warriors are restless. They want to fight. We will fight, Chayton said. First, we take the enemy's strength. Then we use it against him. The next day, Ash Hollow simmered. The arrest of Elder Red Elk and the raid on the Copper Daisy had pushed the town past its quiet anxiety into a state of open division. Sheriff Crowley, emboldened, walked the street with 4 black spur men. He was no longer just Bixby's man. He was the occupying force. In the Copper Daisy, now with a sheet of canvas nailed over the broken door, Aunt Ada was serving coffee, her bruised face a silent accusation. The ranchers and a few quiet townsfolk were there, speaking in low tones. This ain't law, one cattleman said. The same one from before. This is a land grab. He beat Ada. He jailed an old man for speaking his mind. That old man is an agitator. A miner countered from the other side of the room. He was still wearing his pit clothes. Bixby pays our wages. He opens the new seam. That is 200 jobs. My family eats because of that man. If the Taltsoni will not move, they should be moved. He pays you with stolen money, Aunt Ada said, slamming a cup on the bar. The miner went quiet. The argument was over. The lines were drawn. Then came the final provocation. Silas Bixby doubled the bounty on Chayton. He wanted to make a point. A new poster was printed. It was nailed not just to the sheriff's office, but to the double oak doors of the town's only church. $1,000. Chayton, dead or alive. Pastor Gideon was a thin, quiet man who usually spoke of forgiveness. He came out of the parsonage, saw the notice on his church, and his face, normally pale, turned a dull, angry red. He walked to the poster and began to pull at it with his bare hands. The paper was thick, pasted on. Crowley saw him. Leave it, Pastor. That is official business. This is the house of God, Gideon said, his voice shaking but loud. It is not a bounty board. You will not nail your warrants for blood money to my door. That man is an outlaw, Crowley said, stepping onto the church's walkway. That man is a creation of your greed. Gideon retorted. He ripped the poster down, tearing it in half. You speak of progress, Sheriff, but you have brought nothing but violence and fear. You jailed a man of peace. You assaulted a woman who runs an honest business. You hunt another man for sport. This is not justice. This is tyranny. The small crowd that had gathered gasped. The pastor had never spoken this way. Crowley's hand went to his pistol. He wanted to hit the man, but hitting a pastor was different from hitting Aunt Ada. He looked at the faces in the crowd. He saw the miner, who looked uneasy. He saw the rancher, who looked impressed. You best stick to sermons, Pastor, Crowley snarled. He picked up the ruined poster. But you cannot tear them all down. Bixby's patience is at an end. So is mine. He stalked off. The town was a coiled spring. As twilight approached, the air changed. The wind picked up, but it was not the cold, clean wind of the plains. It was hot, dry. The sky to the west turned a bruised purple and green. There was no rain, only a tense, electric smell. Chayton, 2 moons, and Eliza were hidden in the rocks above the railroad cut, the place where Eliza had sketched her map. They were doing a final reconnaissance. 2 moons pointed, his fingers steady. There, the guard patrol, just as you said. Eliza watched through her spyglass. 2 black spur men walked the tracks, checking the rails. They are looking for damage, Chayton said. They are nervous. They watched the guards walk the line for half a mile, then turn back. They will be back in 2 hours, Eliza said. The train is due in 45 minutes. We have a window. As they were about to move, 2 moons grabbed Chayton's arm. He did not speak. He just pointed down. toward the edge of the town's rail yard. A man was walking toward the depot. Sheriff Crowley stepped out of the shadows to meet him. The man was Taltsoni.
"Jonah Pike,"
Chayton breathed, his voice tight. Eliza watched through the glass. She saw Jonah speak. He gestured up, toward the hills. He was talking about the patrols. She saw Crowley hand him something. Not paper, a bottle of whiskey and a few coins. Jonah hid them in his coat and slipped away. 2 Moons made a sound in his throat, a low growl. His knife was in his hand. "He is a snake. He sells his people for liquor. He sold you. He sold Red Elk. He is the reason they knew about you in the canyon." He started to rise. "I will cut his throat." "No." Chayton's hands shot out, gripping 2 Moons' wrist. His grip was iron. "He betrays us," 2 Moons hissed, struggling. "He is one of us," Chayton said, his voice a blade. "He is lost. He is weak. But he is Taltsoni. He is a traitor." "And we do not spill Taltsoni blood. Not tonight. Tonight, our enemy is Bixby. If you kill Jonah now, Crowley will know his spy is dead. He will know we are here. He will double the guards and stop the train. You will ruin everything for vengeance." 2 Moons stared at Chayton, his eyes full of hate. He was trembling with the need to kill, but the logic held him. He finally relaxed his arm, and Chayton released him. "After," 2 Moons whispered, "after this is done, he is mine." Chayton did not answer. He looked at the spot where Jonah Pike had vanished, and his face was carved from stone. As if the betrayal had summoned it, the sky tore open. A flash of lightning, bright white and forked, struck the high ridge across the cut. It did not just strike, it exploded. The sound was a simultaneous crack and boom that shook the ground. The air smelled of sulfur and burning pine. A massive ponderosa pine, which had stood on that ridge for 100 years, groaned. It had been hit dead center. It wavered, balanced for a heart-stopping second, and then fell, slow and majestic, directly across the railroad tracks. It landed with a sound like a cannon shot, blocking the cut completely. "The spirits are angry," 2 Moons said, his voice awed. Eliza lowered her spyglass. "They will have to stop. They cannot clear that in an hour." "No," Chayton said. A slow, grim smile touched his lips for the first time. "They will have to stop, but they will not stop here. They will stop before the cut. In the open, they will send a crew on foot to see the blockage. We will have time." He looked at Eliza. "The thunder has given us a gift." He began to move, climbing higher to get a better vantage point. A loose piece of shale, struck by the lightning's concussion, dislodged under his hand. He slipped, catching himself on a sharp granite outcrop. He stood up, shaking his hand. Eliza saw the blood in the next flash of lightning. It was a long, deep gash on his forearm. "You are hurt," she said. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing. It will slow you down. Come here." They moved back into the shallow cave they had used before. The storm was all around them now, dry lightning flickering from cloud to cloud. A constant, silent light show. Eliza took off her own neckerchief. It was not clean, but it was dry. "Let me see." He hesitated. He was not a man accustomed to help, but he held out his arm. She took it. His skin was warm. She poured a small amount of water from her canteen onto the cloth. Her movements were efficient and impersonal. He flinched as she cleaned the wound, the grit scraping the raw flesh, but he did not make a sound. She worked quickly, her brow furrowed in concentration. She tore the cloth into a long strip and began to wrap the wound, pulling the bandage tight. He watched her. He watched the way her small hands moved with such certainty. He watched the line of her jaw, focused on the task. She was not a warrior. She was not a hunter, but she had no fear in her. "Not of this." "You have done this before," he said, his voice quiet. "I told you," she said, tying the knot. "A hospital. I was a nurse's aide for a time. I saw wounds worse than this." She finished, Her hands lingered on his arm for a moment. He did not pull away. "It will hold," she said, meeting his gaze. He looked at the neat, tight bandage. Then he touched the small, worn buckskin pouch at his neck. "In my tribe," he said, "when a wound is given, a truth is spoken." He paused. "My father taught me, Ibi Sha Nina." Eliza remembered the word for peace. This was different. "What does it mean?" "It means," Chayton said, his eyes holding hers, "the heart knows the way home." She looked down at her own hands, the hands that had wrapped his wound, the hands that had drawn the false maps, the hands that now held a forged treaty. She wondered if her heart had any idea where home was. A sound cut through the electric air. It was not thunder. It was a long, mournful whistle, echoing from the east. Eliza stood up. Chayton was already on his feet, his arm wrapped, his rifle in his good hand. Mara's tools were heavy in a canvas sack at his hip. The train. Eliza pulled her hair back from her face, her fingers moving quickly, tying it in a tight, severe knot. The wind whipped stray strands around her face, but she did not care. The schoolteacher was gone. The nurse was gone. The surveyor was here. "It is time," she said. The train whistle was a low moan in the dark, much closer now. The dry lightning had stopped, leaving the air heavy and tasting of ozone. "Mara is in place," Chayton said. He and Eliza were moving low and fast, parallel to the tracks, staying deep in the shadows of the rocks. 2 moons had already vanished, flanking them 100 yards out. His job to watch for any patrols Jonah Pike might have directed. They reached the spur. A half-mile before the lightning-struck tree that blocked the pass, Mara was waiting. A small figure crouched by a rusted track switch. She was not a warrior, but she had the calm of a woman who commanded hot steel. She held a small, tightly wrapped package of blasting powder and a short fuse. "This anchor pin is cracked," she whispered, her voice excited. "Bixby uses cheap iron. This will snap the switch plate clean. He will not be able to reverse. He will be trapped between this and the tree." The train's single headlamp cut the blackness. It was coming slowly, the engineer cautious in the heavy, electric air. "Now," Chayton said. Mara lit the fuse. She did not run. She pressed herself flat behind a boulder. The fuse sparked. The explosion was barely a sound. It was a sharp, dull thud, like a heavy hammer striking an anvil. It was not loud enough to carry to town, but it was powerful enough. The iron pins shattered. The switch plate jumped, twisted, and settled back onto the ties at a wrong angle. The train's engine hit the damaged switch. The sound was a nightmare of metal. The engine bucked, a screaming, grinding protest of steel on steel. Brakes locked. Steam hissed in a great, choking cloud. And the entire train engine, coal car, 2 freight cars, and the Black Mary at the end lurched to a violent, shuddering halt. Men were shouting from the engine cab. "Go," Chayton commanded. They ran, using the steam and confusion as cover. Guards on the freight cars were looking forward, toward the engine, their rifles raised. They had not seen the figures in the dark. Chayton reached the Black Mary first. The platform between it and the last freight car was empty. The guards there had been thrown to the floor by the impact. Chayton was on the ladder in a second, his bandaged arm taking the strain without a sign of pain. He swung onto the platform and dealt with the first dazed guard with a single, silent strike. The second man raised his pistol, but Chayton was already moving, his hand clamping on the man's wrist, twisting until the gun clattered to the floor. Eliza was right behind him. She did not wait for help. She was already at the heavy steel door of the car. "Get them tied," she said, her voice all business. She pulled a small oilskin packet from her pocket. Inside, nestled in velvet, were thin steel picks and a master key. One she had filed herself from a blank. "Standard railroad lock. They think steel plating is enough. They never change the cores." She slid the key in. It stopped. She jiggled it. applied a slight pressure, and turned. The lock clicked. She pushed the door open. They were inside. The car was an office, just as she had imagined. It smelled of cigar smoke and old leather. A mahogany desk was bolted to the floor. In the far corner, a large black safe with gold painting stood proud. "The decoy," Eliza said instantly, not even looking at it. "For payroll." He would not keep his secrets there. She knelt by the desk. Underneath, bolted to the floor and painted a dull, unremarkable gray, was a smaller Kresge safe. This one. Chayton unslung the canvas bag and pulled out Mara's tools, the heavy forged steel lever and the tapered wedge. Eliza examined the hinges. "She was right," she breathed. "External pins. He thinks the bolts in the floor are enough." She slotted the thin edge of the wedge into the gap. Chayton placed the lever. "Now," she said. Before he could put his weight on it, the door at the far end of the car burst open. Sheriff Crowley stood there, his face contorted with rage, his pistol leveled, and beside him, his face a mask of pale terror, was the traitor, Jonah Pike.
The key, Miss Hart.
Crowley snarled.
He said you had a key. Jonah, you were right.
Jonah Pike looked at Chayton, and his eyes were sick. "I had to," Jonah whispered. "My mother, she needs the medicine from Cheyenne. Bixby promised."
"Silence, you fool,"
Crowley snapped.
"Drop the tools, both of you."
Chayton moved, not toward Crowley, but sideways, shoving Eliza behind the heavy desk. The motion was fluid, fast as a snake. He brought his own rifle up. The first shot was his. The sound inside the car was deafening, a physical blow that left ears ringing. The bullet tore a chunk of mahogany from the doorframe, inches from Crowley's head. Crowley fired back. The bullet screamed off the steel safe, ricocheting around the small space. "They are in the engine," a man shouted from outside. The train gave another violent lurch, this time backward. The engineer was trying to reverse, grinding the wheels against the broken switch. A new sound joined the chaos, a man's scream, high and thin, from the engine cab. It was a scream of pure agony. Crowley was distracted. He looked back toward the engine. He needed the train moved. He needed his cargo. "Watch them, Jonah," he commanded. He turned and ran from the car, back toward the engine, leaving Jonah Pike shaking, his pistol wavering in his hand. Chayton saw his chance. He rose from behind the desk. He could take Jonah easily. He could go after Crowley. He stepped onto the platform. He saw Crowley, not in the engine, but jumping from the far side, landing in the gravel. A horse was tied in the rocks nearby. Crowley was running toward it. He was escaping. Chayton started to follow. He would run him down. Then he saw the engine cab. The engineer, a young man from town Eliza had seen, was trapped. In the panic, the reverse lever had kicked, catching his leg, pinning him against the boiler. Scalding steam poured from a cracked pipe, boiling his skin. The fireman was cowering by the coal tender, useless with fear. Chayton stopped. He looked at Crowley, disappearing into the night. He heard the engineer's choked, terrible scream. He looked at the fireman, who was just a boy, with a deep, guttural sound of pure frustration. Chayton turned his back on Crowley and launched himself into the engine cab. He shoved the terrified fireman toward the valve.
"Shut the steam now."
He grabbed the heavy brass lever, the metal so hot it seared his palms. He ignored the pain. He set his feet, his muscles knotting. He roared, a sound from deep in his chest, putting all his strength against the mechanism. The engineer's leg was mangled, trapped by 2 tons of pressure. Chayton pulled. The lever did not move. "He is gone," Eliza's voice came from behind him. "Chayton, Crowley is gone. Bixby was with him. They rode off." Chayton did not look at her. He looked at the trapped man, whose screams were weakening. He set his grip again, his bandaged arm straining. "He is not," he said, and pulled. The lever moved.
1 inch. 2. The engineer screamed and pulled his leg free. A raw, bloody ruin. He collapsed to the floor of the cab, unconscious. Chayton stood there, breathing heavily, his hands raw. He had saved the man. He had let the enemy escape. He turned and walked back to the Black Mary. Eliza was waiting. Jonah Pike was gone, having fled into the night after Crowley. "He took the treaty," Eliza said, her voice numb. "Crowley ran right to him. Bixby was waiting with the horses. They took the original treaty. It was not in the safe." "How do you know?" She pointed. The safe door was on the floor, its hinges ripped from the frame. "The lever, I used it myself. It was not as hard as I thought." Inside, the safe was mostly empty, but on the floor was a thick, heavy ledger, bound in black leather. Eliza picked it up. She flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the pages. "Oh, God," she whispered. "It is all here. The bribes, the names, the dates, the payments to the commission, the money for Judge Vaughn." "But not the treaty," Chayton said. He looked down the tracks where Bixby had fled. "No, we have the proof of the crime, but he still has the weapon." They heard whistles. The black spur men from the rest of the train were organized, running toward them. "We go," Chayton said. He grabbed the heavy ledger from her hands. "This is enough, for now." They slipped off the train's blind side and disappeared into the rocks. By morning, Ash Hollow was a hornet's nest. Bixby had ridden straight to the telegraph office. He branded the attack an act of war. Railroad terrorism by Chayton's savage band. He accused the school teacher, Eliza Hart, of being a dangerous Confederate, a spy for the Union Pacific, sent to destroy Bixby's line. A new decree was posted before the sun was fully up. The trial of Elder Red Elk was moved. It would not be in 2 days. It would be tomorrow, at sunrise. The pretense of a legal waiting period was gone. Bixby was moving his endgame. They were hidden in a deep, sheltered part of the Crescent Valley, a place of tall pines and quiet springs. The air was clean. 2 moons had met them, his face grim as he heard the news. "We failed," Eliza said. She sat by a smokeless fire, staring at the leather ledger in her lap. "We have his account book, but he has the treaty. He still controls the law. I let him get away. I aimed for the wrong target." "You did not fail," Chayton said. He was treating his burned hands with a salve of pine pitch. "We struck the iron horse. We made it bleed. We made Bixby show his hand. He is afraid. That is why he moves the trial." "What good is this?" She slapped the book. "He will have me arrested before I can even open it. He will have the forged treaty ratified by his fake judge before anyone can hear the truth." Chayton finished wrapping his hands. He stood up. He looked at the graves of his ancestors, marked by simple stones. "You are right," he said. "He will not let you speak in his court, so we will not use his court." He turned to Eliza, his eyes clear, the doubt gone. "He is staging a public trial to legalize his theft. We will use his own stage to show them the thief. We will show this book to the whole town. We will show them the names. We will show them who Bixby bought." Eliza looked up, her mind catching his meaning. "A public confrontation, not a legal one." "It is the only way," he said. "We have the truth. Now we just need the people to hear it." He turned to 2 moons. "Go, find the pastor. Find Mara. Find the ranchers who hate the railroad. Tell them to be at the courthouse at sunrise. Tell them to bring their friends. Tell them the map woman has a story to read them." 2 moons nodded, a grim smile on his face. "And us?" "We," Chayton said, picking up the heavy ledger, "will find a way to get her inside." The sun rose red, painting the dust of the square in a bloody light. This was not a trial. It was a pageant of power. Silas Bixby had not chosen the courthouse. He had ordered a stage built from a flatbed wagon in the open, where every citizen of Ash Hollow could witness his legal triumph. Judge Alistair Vaughn sat at a rough pine table, his face pale and sweating in the cool morning air. He looked like a man who had not slept, his eyes darting nervously to the dozen black spur men who lined the square, their rifles held ready. Silas Bixby stood beside him, immaculate in a black suit, his expression one of complete, satisfied control. Sheriff Crowley, enjoying his moment, dragged Elder Red Elk from the jail. The old man was bound in heavy chains, but he walked with a slow, unbroken dignity. He was seated on a stool in the center of the wagon, a living trophy. The town was assembled, split clean in two, on the side by the mine office. The miners gathered, their faces grim, their hands clenched. They wanted this over. They wanted their wages. On the side by the church, Pastor Gideon stood with Aunt Ada, whose face was a testament to Bixby's methods. Mara the blacksmith was there, her arms crossed, and a handful of ranchers who had seen their water rights shrink. They were outnumbered, and they knew it. "This court is now in session," Judge Vaughn began, his voice thin and reedy. Bixby's lawyer, a sharp man from Cheyenne, stepped forward. "Your Honor, we are here to affirm the legality of the new territorial treaty and to pass sentence on this agitator." He gestured to Red Elk, "who has incited violence and rebellion against the lawful progress of—" "Stop!" The voice cut through the air. It was a woman's voice, clear, cold, and absolute. Eliza Hart stepped out of the alley between the Copper Daisy and the general store. She was no longer the schoolteacher. She wore trousers and her surveying boots. Her hair was tied back, and in her hands she held the thick black leather ledger. Sheriff Crowley's hand snapped to his pistol. "It is her the spy sees her." "Sees me for what?" Eliza called out, her voice ringing across the silent square. She held the ledger high for all to see. "For possession of Mr. Bixby's private accounts, for knowing the truth." Bixby's smile did not falter, but his eyes went cold. He recognized his book. "This is not a trial, gentlemen," Eliza said, walking slowly into the center of the square. "It is a business meeting, and I have the minutes." She opened the book. "I have here an entry, dated May 10th, 1876, to Commissioner Allen, $5,000 for securing the votes on the new treaty." And another, June 1st, to Judge Alistair Vaughn, $2,000 for services rendered. The crowd gasped. The miners shifted, looking at each other, then at the pale, sweating judge. Pastor Gideon stepped forward, his face alight. Bixby's lawyer was the first to recover. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Your Honor, this is desperation. This is the act of a cornered criminal." He dramatically produced a piece of paper. "I hold in my hand a telegraphed warrant, issued this morning by the United States Marshal, a warrant for the arrest of this woman, Eliza Hart, for conspiracy, armed sabotage of the railroad, and theft of private property. She is a terrorist." He turned to the miners, his voice booming with righteous anger. "This woman and her savage partner, the outlaw Chayton, blew up your train, your lifeline, your wages, everything in that book was stolen. It is the word of a saboteur, and it is worthless." The tide turned in an instant. The miners, who had been wavering, now looked at her with open hatred. Terrorist was the word. She had attacked their livelihood. "Arrest her," Sheriff Bixby commanded. Crowley grinned, his confidence restored. He and two black spur men advanced on Eliza. "You heard the man. Give me the book. Miss Hart, your little game is over." Eliza stood her ground, but her heart hammered. She was trapped. "I would not." The voice was low, deep, and came from the alley behind her. The crowd parted, a human wave receding from the sound. Chayton stepped into the sunlight. He wore his town clothes, but there was no mistaking the power in his stance. His rifle was held low. The muzzle pointed at the ground, but his hand was steady on the grip. His burned palms were visible, wrapped in clean cloth. He stopped 10 feet from Eliza, placing himself directly between her and Crowley's men. The $1,000 bounty. Standing in the middle of the square? Well, Crowley breathed, his eyes wide with greed. Look at this. He came to his own hanging. Men. He gestured to the Black Spur mercenaries. Today we are all rich men. Take him. The mercenaries fanned out, their rifles coming up. The square was a powder keg, and Chayton was the match. The woman speaks, Chayton said. It was not a request. You will listen. Eliza knew she had only a moment. The lawyer had won the miners. She had to win them back. She ignored Bixby, ignored Crowley, and looked at the miners' wives. Standing at the edge of the crowd, their faces etched with worry. He calls me a criminal, Eliza said, her voice shaking now, not with fear, but with shame. He says I attacked your future. He is right. I was on that train. I stole that book. She locked eyes with a woman in a faded blue bonnet, a woman she had seen in the general store, trying to buy flour on credit. I know about lines on paper, Eliza said, her voice dropping, becoming personal. Before I came here, I worked for men just like Silas Bixby. In Nebraska, they sent me to map a valley, just like the Crescent. And when I finished, they told me my lines were wrong. They said I had made a statistical error. They paid me $200 extra to move my boundary markers half a mile south. Her voice was thick. I took the money. I needed it. I told myself it did not matter. It was just ink. It was just lines. She took a breath. 2 weeks later, the Army used my map to evict 100 families. They said the treaty was clear. They burned their homes. I watched them walk away with nothing, all because of a line I was paid to move. The woman in the blue bonnet had tears in her eyes. The miners were watching Eliza now, the hate in their eyes replaced by a dawning, sick understanding. That, Eliza shouted, pointing her finger at the forged treaty on the judge's table, is the same lie that is my lie. All over again, Bixby is using that paper to steal from the Taltsoni, and when he is done, when he needs more water, more land for his mine, he will draw a new line, and he will use it to steal from you. The square was silent. She had reached them. Silas Bixby saw it. He had lost them. The entire spectacle had turned against him. Burn it, he snarled. A low command to the Black Spur man closest to Eliza. Burn that book, now. The mercenary lunged. He was not expecting resistance. He grabbed for the ledger. Eliza tried to pull it back, but he was stronger. He ripped it from her grasp and flung it toward the only fire in the square, a small blacksmith's pot of hot coals, ready for branding. No, Eliza screamed. The book hit the coals. The leather cover instantly smoked, curled, and caught fire. Get the book, Chayton yelled. But Mara was already moving. She shot from the crowd like a cannonball, a heavy forge hammer in her hand. She did not go for the man. She went for the fire. She swung the hammer with all her strength, striking the iron pot. The pot exploded, sending a shower of burning coals and the flaming ledger skittering across the dust. The book fell open, its pages catching the wind, the edges burning. A Black Spur man raised his rifle to shoot her. A single shot cracked from the roof. It was not Chayton. 2 moons. The bullet hit the mercenary's rifle, shattering the wooden stock and sending the gun spinning from his hands. Mara screamed as she plunged her bare hands into the scattered coals. Grabbing the burning book, she beat the flames out against her heavy leather apron, her own flesh sizzling. Crowley raised his pistol. Shoot her! Shoot them all! But no one was looking at Crowley. They were looking at Judge Alistair Vaughn. The judge had seen the pages, now scattered and charred. He had seen his own name, clear as day, on a half-burned page that had landed at his feet. Vaughn, 2000. He was not a fighter. He was not a Bixby. He was a small, greedy man who was in too deep. This was supposed to be a simple piece of paper, not gunfire, not his name in a bribe book, not a woman on fire. He made a small, strangled sound. Then he ran. He did not adjourn. He did not speak. He knocked his chair over, scrambled off the wagon, shoved a stunned miner out of his way, and ran, as fast as his legs would carry him, toward the livery stable. The entire square stood in stunned silence. The law had fled. Bixby's authority, the legal weapon he had worked so hard to build, was gone. Sprinting for a horse, Bixby's face was purple with rage.
"Hold them, Crowley! Hold them!"
But the spell was broken. Crowley looked at his fleeing judge, at the divided crowd, at Chayton's rifle, at 2 moons on the roof, and at Mara, holding the smoking ruin of the ledger, a look of triumph on her face. Crowley made the only choice he had left. He was a wolf, and the pack was here. He raised his pistol to the sky and fired. Black Spur. To me, this is a riot. Shoot the outlaw. Shoot the woman. Take them. The mercenaries lowered their rifles, aiming at Chayton and Eliza. At that exact moment, Pastor Gideon ran to the church and seized the bell rope. The sound hammered the sky. Clang, clang, clang. It was not the Sunday call to prayer. It was the fire alarm, the sound of disaster. The town erupted. Civilians screamed and ran for cover. The ranchers drew their pistols, firing at the Black Spur men. "Eliza now?" Chayton grabbed her arm, pulling her from her shock. He fired his rifle once, the bullet kicking up dust at the mercenaries' feet, forcing them to pause.
"Mara, 2 moons with me!"
he roared. He shoved Eliza toward the alley.
"This is not our fight. We need the rocks to Cinder Canyon go."
A bullet splintered the wood of the copper daisy, right where Eliza's head had been. The Black Spur men were advancing, firing. Chayton fired again, covering her. They plunged into the narrow alley, Mara clutching the burned book, 2 moons dropping from the roof to join them. They ran, the sound of the church bell and the flat crack of rifles echoing as the battle for Ash Hollow began. Cinder Canyon was a slit in the earth, a place of black volcanic rock and dust so fine it hung in the air like gunpowder. The church bell was a frantic, hammering echo behind them, swallowed by the closer, sharper crack of rifles. Chayton, Eliza, Mara, and 2 moons ran, their lungs burning. They had stashed horses at the edge of the town's graveyard, a grim forecast of the day's work. They mounted and spurred them, not toward the open plains, but into the narrow mouth of the canyon.
"They are coming!"
2 moons yelled, looking back. A dozen riders, Crowley in the heart of the Black Spur, their faces grim. They were not lawmen now. They were a posse, and they wanted blood. The canyon twisted. Hoofbeats echoed, making it sound as if they were surrounded. The black dust rose, choking them, blinding them. A bullet whined off the canyon wall, the sound sharp and close.
"This way!"
Chayton yelled. "The path narrows. They cannot follow on horseback." He leaped from his horse, pulling his rifle. The others followed, slapping the horses' rumps to send them scattering deeper into the pass. They began to climb, scrambling over a steep fall of loose scree. Eliza was not a climber. Her boots, practical as they were, could find no purchase on the shifting, fine gravel. She slipped, her hand grasping at the air. She fell, sliding back down the incline toward a sheer drop into the canyon's dark bottom. She cried out, a short, sharp sound of surprise. Chayton was 5 yards ahead. He heard her. He spun, his face a mask of fury. Not at her, but at the world. He lunged back down the slope, moving with a speed that defied the treacherous footing. He caught her by the front of her shirt, his grip iron, and hauled her bodily upward. A rifle cracked from the rim above. It was not an echo, it was close. Chayton grunted, a deep, sharp sound of impact. He did not fall. He shoved Eliza forward, pushing her past him, up the slope, throwing her behind a massive, black boulder. "Chayton!" she screamed. He stumbled, falling to one knee, but his rifle was already up, aimed at the rim. "It is nothing," he bit out. "A scratch." She saw the blood. It was high on his left shoulder, a dark, spreading stain, a new wound, far from the graze on his arm.
2 moons, Mara, the high ledge, Chayton roared,
pushing himself up.
Ignoring the pain. Pin them down.
2 moons and Mara scrambled for cover, their own weapons finding targets. Gunfire erupted, the narrow canyon amplifying every shot into a deafening war. Crowley's men were at the bottom of the scree slope, trapped, firing upward. A new figure appeared on the rim, the one who had fired the shot. He stood outlined against the gray sky. He was Taltsoni.
Jonah Pike,
Chayton breathed. 2 moons saw him. He let out a wordless yell of pure rage and raised his rifle. He led them to us, traitor.
Wait, Chayton commanded.
Jonah Pike stood there, his rifle in his hands, looking down. He was caught between his people, pinned below, and the black spur men who were climbing up to join him. His face was a mask of pure terror.
Jonah,
Crowley yelled from below.
Finish them! Shoot the outlaw!
Jonah raised his rifle. He aimed it down at Chayton. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the weapon. His eyes met Chayton's.
Jonah!
Chayton's voice was not a plea. It was a command. Choose, are you his dog, or are you Taltsoni? Jonah made a sound, a choked sob. He looked at Crowley, then at Chayton. He turned his rifle, not at Chayton, but at the rock face just above Crowley. He fired. The bullet struck the unstable cliff, sending a ton of black cinder and rock showering down. The black spur men yelled, scrambling for cover as the slide buried their position.
He is betraying us,
Crowley roared, furious. Jonah did not wait. He dropped his rifle and began to slide down the scree slope. Half falling, half running, he landed in a heap at Chayton's feet, his body shaking. 2 moons was on him in an instant, his long knife at Jonah's throat.
I will gut you, snake! You sold us!
Stop, Chayton said. He was leaning heavily against the rock, his left arm hanging useless, but his voice was absolute.
My mother.
Jonah Pike choked out, tears cutting clean lines through the black dust on his face. She is sick. The lung fever. The medicine from the doctor in Cheyenne. It cost $20 a bottle. Bixby paid for it. He said he would keep her alive. He said no one would be hurt. He just wanted the map woman's papers.
He sold Red Elk,
2 moons snarled, pressing the blade. His mother's life is not worth our elders. Chayton looked at Jonah, a man broken by a choice no man should have to make. He saw the love, he saw the weakness, he saw the terrible, agonizing shame. Get up, Chayton said. Jonah flinched, waiting for the killing blow. Get up, Jonah Pike. Chayton's voice was flat, empty of pity, but also empty of vengeance. You are Taltsoni. You betrayed your people. You cannot wash that blood off your hands. He looked at 2 moons. Let him go. 2 moons stared, disbelieving, but he pulled his knife back. Chayton kicked Jonah's fallen rifle. Pick it up. You will not work for Silas Bixby again. You will not drink his poison. You will take your mother, and you will leave this territory. If I ever see you again. His voice dropped. I will let 2 moons have his wish. Now, you bought your life with Bixby's money. Pay for it. Get them off our trail. Jonah scrambled for the rifle, his eyes wild with a desperate, new purpose. He is at the bridge. Jonah stammered, his voice urgent. Bixby, he is at the high trestle. He is moving everything tonight. The real treaty. He has it in a new safe, a small one. He is taking it out of the county. Tonight. Go, Chayton commanded. Jonah Pike nodded, his debt spoken. He scrambled up the far side of the canyon, a ghost given a second chance. The rest of them are retreating, 2 moons said, his voice cold with disapproval. You are merciful. It is a weakness. No, Chayton said. He slid down the rock wall, his face pale, his breath coming in short gasps. It is a choice. Eliza was at his side instantly. Mara, 2 moons. Watch the pass. Give us 1 minute. The two nodded and took up positions. Eliza pulled Chayton deeper into a narrow cleft in the rock, a space barely wide enough for 2 people. The smell of sulfur and his blood filled the air. Let me see, she said, her voice low. He slumped, the fight gone out of him, his head falling back against the stone. She ripped the tattered, bloody shirt away. It was not a graze. The bullet had torn a deep furrow of flesh and muscle high on his shoulder. It was bleeding, a dark, pulsing flow. Oh, she breathed. Chayton. It is fine, he gritted, but a tremor ran through him. Be quiet. She fumbled for her canteen and tore a long, clean strip from the bottom of her petticoat. Her hands were shaking, but her motions were sure. She pressed the folded cloth hard into the wound. He hissed, a sharp, violent intake of breath. His entire body went rigid. The pain, held back by adrenaline, crashed over him. He looked at her, his eyes dark, the pupils wide with shock. He was seeing her, but he was also seeing the pain, the canyon, the betrayal, the fight, the wound. It was too much. Eliza's face was close to his. She held the pressure, her own fear gone, replaced by a desperate need to anchor him. I know, she whispered, her voice soft, trying to pull him back. I am sorry. Just hold on. Just breathe. I am here. He reached up, his good hand, his right hand, the one that was not burned. He did not touch her face. His fingers tangled in her hair, gripping it, not gently, but with a desperate, anchoring strength. Eliza, he breathed. His voice was a raw, broken rasp. Stay. The word was torn from him. It was not a request. It was a plea from a man who had never pleaded for anything. She froze, her hand still pressed to his shoulder. He pulled his head closer, his forehead resting against hers. He closed his eyes, his breathing ragged. He smelled the dust and the clean, faint scent of soap on her skin. She was the only thing in this black, roaring canyon that was real. You are my breath, he whispered, the admission a ragged confession. The world stopped, the distant, fading shouts of Crowley's men, the dry wind, the pain. It all receded. There was only the darkness of the cleft, the pressure of her hands on his body, and his hand tangled in her hair. Eliza's heart, which had been hammering with fear, gave a single, painful lurch. She understood. This was not desire. This was survival. She covered his hand with her own, pressing his fingers against her head. I am not going anywhere, she promised, her voice as steady as his was broken. He held her for one more shuddering second. Then the wave of pain crested and passed. He let go. His hand dropped, his body going limp against the rock. Never let her go, he whispered, but it was to himself, a promise, not of possession, of protection. Eliza tied the bandage, her fingers swift and tight, her mind racing. The moment was over. The world rushed back in. 2 moons appeared at the mouth of the cleft. His face was grim. They are gone. Jonah led them west. The canyon is clear. For now. Chayton pushed himself up, his face a mask of pale, sweat-soaked granite. He was back. Jonah's words, Eliza said, her voice tight, all business. Bixby is at the High Trestle. He's moving the real treaty tonight. The High Trestle, Chayton said. He looked at Mara, who was checking the half-burned ledger. It is the only way out by rail before the mountains. He is fleeing the county. The judge ran, Mara said, her voice bitter. Bixby is next. He is taking the proof. If he crosses the county line, Eliza said, the awful realization dawning. It is over. The treaty is gone. We can never prove the forgery. He will be safe, and Red Elk will hang. Chayton nodded. He looked at his small, battered team. A warrior with a bleeding shoulder and a burned hand. a blacksmith with scorched fingers, a map woman with a torn dress, a single scout. "We are not enough," Two Moon said flatly. "Bixby will have every black spur man he has left. He will be guarding that bridge." "The town," Chayton said. "The square. We were not the only ones fighting." He turned to Two Moons. "Go! Run! Find Pastor Gideon. Find the ranchers who drew on Crowley. Tell them Bixby is at the High Trestle. Tell them he is not just stealing our land. He is fleeing with the proof that he bought the judge. Tell them the final battle is not in the town. It is at the bridge." Two Moon's dark eyes lit with a fierce, new hope, a new alliance. A motley one. Chayton agreed. "Tell them to bring fire. Tell them to bring ropes. We are stopping a train. Go." Two Moons was gone, disappearing up the rock face like a lizard. Chayton, Eliza, and Mara looked at each other. The last light of the day was fading. "This is madness," Mara said, but she was already reloading her pistol. "It is the only way," Chayton said. He pulled himself onto his horse, his body stiff, his face pale, but his eyes were clear. Eliza mounted beside him. She looked at the fresh white bandage on his shoulder. He met her gaze. The vulnerability of the cleft was gone, replaced by iron, but the memory of his words, his breath, was a living thing between them. He turned his horse toward the high pass, leading east. The sun was a sliver of molten red, bleeding out behind the black peaks. The world was bathed in a deep, bloody twilight. As they reached the ridge overlooking Ash Hollow, Chayton stopped. Far below, on the hill above the church, a single fire bloomed in the darkness, a signal. Then another, from the east, on the rancher's ridge. "He is coming," Chayton said, a grim smile touching his lips. "The pastor, he is bringing the town." He raised his good arm, pointing toward the horizon, where the distant, spiderweb silhouette of the High Trestle Bridge stood black against the dying light. "We ride." The High Trestle Bridge was a skeletal spine of wood and iron, spanning a 200-foot drop over a dry riverbed. The wind howled through its beams, a high, mournful shriek that sounded like a warning. Silas Bixby had set his trap well. He had his private car, the Black Mary, uncoupled and waiting in the middle of the bridge, the engine already sent ahead. He was cornered, but he was cornered like a wolverine, on his own ground. The bridge was not dark. It was lit by fire. Barrels of tar, brought for sealing the timbers, had been rolled to both ends of the bridge and set ablaze. The black, oily smoke choked the air, and the flames cast a leaping, hellish light. The Black Spur Men, Bixby's last line of defense, were silhouetted against the fire, their rifles ready. They were trapped, but they were guarding the only way across. Chayton, Eliza, and Mara left their horses in the rocks, approaching on foot. They could hear the rails ringing as the wind vibrated them. "This is a fortress," Mara breathed, her hands raw from the fire, clutching her heavy hammer. "We cannot get near him." "We do not go near him," Chayton said. His voice was strained. The ride had cost him, and his shirt was stiff with fresh blood. "We go under him." He pointed to the massive wooden pilings that supported the bridge. "Mara, the fire is meant to keep us back, but it is also his weakness. That wood is old. It is dry. The fire will not stay in the barrels." "The dynamite," Eliza said, understanding. "He must have a detonator to destroy the bridge himself if he loses." "Two Moons will bring the town to the east end." Chayton planned, his words quick. "They will draw their fire. Mara, you find the dynamite. You stop him from blowing the bridge. Eliza, you go for the safe. He will have it in the car." "And you?" she asked, her eyes on his pale face. "I will keep them busy," he said. He looked at the chaos of the bridge. "I will find Crowley." Mara nodded. "I know blasting caps. I will find them." She slipped away, a shadow moving toward the far end of the bridge, aiming for the anchor points. Chayton looked at Eliza. The moment in the cleft, his hand in her hair, his whispered confession, hung between them, a tangible thing. "You are the map woman," he said, his voice low. "Go draw the new line." He did not wait for her reply. He broke cover, running low, his rifle in his good hand. He fired once at the men silhouetted by the fire. The shot drew their attention. "He is here," a man yelled. Rifles cracked. Bullets chewed the gravel where Chayton had been. He was already moving, using the support pillars as cover. Eliza took her chance. She swung herself over the edge of the ravine, her feet finding the narrow maintenance crostal that ran beneath the rails. She was now under the bridge, in the screaming wind, with a 200-foot drop just inches away. She began to move, hand over hand, her body pressed flat against the timbers. The fire from above cast leaping, monstrous shadows. The whole structure swayed in the wind. Above her, the fight had begun. Chayton was a ghost. He fired, moved, fired again. He was not trying to kill them. He was drawing them out, one by one, away from the car. Sheriff Crowley saw him. "He is mine," Crowley roared. Stepping onto the bridge's main deck, he and Chayton were now on the swaying platform, moving through the smoke, a deadly dance. Eliza kept moving. She reached the Black Mary, hanging suspended over the abyss. The car's steel floor was inches from her face. She saw what she was looking for, a small service hatch, used for axle maintenance. It was bolted from the inside. But Bixby's men, in their haste, had been sloppy. The bolt was not thrown. She pulled the hatch open and slid into the pitch-black undercarriage. From there, she found a panel into the car's small lavatory. She was inside. The main cabin was empty. The safe Jonah had described, a small, black strongbox, was bolted to the desk. She went to work, her picks moving with a surgeon's focus. On the deck outside, Chayton and Crowley met. It was not a gunfight. It was a brawl. Chayton, with his wounded arm, was at a disadvantage. Crowley was a brute, his pistol empty, but his fists were like hammers. He charged, and they slammed into the side rail of the bridge. The wood groaned. Chayton took the blow, his good arm trapping Crowley's. They were locked together, struggling over the void. At the far end, Mara had found the wires. They led from Bixby's car to 3 heavy charges set on the main support pillar. A black spur man was there, guarding the plunger box. Mara did not hesitate. She came out of the shadows, her hammer swinging in a low, vicious arc. It broke the man's leg. She did not stop. She brought the hammer down on the plunger box, smashing the mechanism to pieces. The bridge was safe from its owner. Just as she stood, she saw movement at the east end. A mass of men, some on horseback, some on foot. 2 Moons was at their head, and beside him, his pale face set, was Pastor Gideon. The ranchers were there. The town had come. 2 Moons raised a captured army bugle and blew a ragged, terrible charge. The black spurmen, caught between Chayton on the bridge and the armed townsmen, panicked. Their defense broke. In the car, Eliza felt the lock give. The small steel door swung open. It was all there, a stack of gold coins, a bag of dust, and 2 documents. One was the original, ribbon-bound treaty of 1858. The other was the forged one. And lying on top, gleaming in the lamplight, was the official territorial seal. She had it. She had it all. She grabbed the papers and the heavy seal, stuffing them into her shirt. The car door burst open. Silas Bixby stood there. His face was no longer composed. His suit was torn, his eyes mad. He had fled his defenders. In his hand, he held a small, silver pistol. "Give it to me, you bitch," he whispered. He aimed the pistol at her chest. "Eliza," Chayton roared. He had seen. He had finally overpowered Crowley. Throwing the sheriff to the deck, he was running toward the car. Bixby shifted his aim, leveling the pistol at the new threat. Chayton saw the move. He was 10 feet away. He had a choice. He could charge, take the bullet, and kill Bixby. or he could save her. He threw himself sideways, not at Bixby, but at Eliza. He slammed into her, his body shielding hers, taking them both to the floor. The pistol fired. The bullet, meant for his heart, tore through the fleshy part of his good arm. He roared in pain. Bixby screamed, a sound of pure, thwarted rage. He raised the pistol to fire again, to finish them both. But the bridge had had enough. The fire, which had been burning the tar, had finally caught the ancient, dry timbers of the main support. With a sound like a cannon shot, the support gave way. The entire bridge lurched, dropping 5 feet on one side. Bixby, standing in the doorway, was thrown off balance. He stumbled, his arms windmilling. The pistol flew from his grasp. He tried to grab the doorframe, but he missed. He fell. He did not fall into the ravine. He landed on the narrow, buckled walkway outside, his legs dangling over the 200-foot drop. He clung to a broken piece of railing, his face white with terror. Chayton, bleeding from 2 new wounds, staggered to his feet. He looked down at the man who had tried to kill him, who had destroyed his land, who had jailed his elder. Bixby's eyes, wide with shock, met his. "Help me," he whimpered. "Please, help me." Chayton stood over him. His rifle was on the floor. He could kick him. He could end it. It would be justice. He looked at Eliza, who was watching him, the stolen treaty clutched in her hand. She was safe. Chayton knelt. He leaned over the edge. He grabbed Silas Bixby's wrist. "No," Bixby whispered, not understanding. Chayton set his feet, his wounded body screaming in protest. He pulled. It was a dead weight. Bixby was too terrified to help. "Pull, damn you!" Chayton grunted, his vision blurring. He hauled the man, his enemy, up from the edge of death. He dragged him onto the buckled deck of the bridge. Bixby lay there, sobbing, a broken, wealthy man. Chayton stood, his blood dripping onto the floor. He had made his choice. Vengeance was easy. Justice was harder. The fight outside was almost over. The town militia, led by 2 Moons, had swept the bridge. Sheriff Crowley, seeing his men fall, had made a run for it. He found a horse, leaped into the saddle, and spurred it toward the darkness, toward escape. He did not get 10 yards. A single rider blocked his path. It was Jonah Pike. "Get out of my way, you traitorous dog!" Crowley screamed, raising his pistol. Jonah did not move. He just sat on his horse, his face calm, his own rifle level. "She is my mother, Sheriff," he said, "and these are my people." He fired. Crowley clutched his chest, a look of profound surprise on his face. He toppled from the saddle, dead before he hit the ground. Jonah looked at the body, then at Chayton, who was emerging from the car, supporting Eliza. Jonah nodded once, his debt paid. Then he turned his horse and rode slowly into the night. The wind shifted. The fire, which had been raging, was now starved for fuel as the bridge's main section began to tear away. The flames died, guttering in the rising, clean breeze from the west. A great, groaning tier of wood and iron echoed up from the ravine, the far end of the bridge, its support gone, pulled away and collapsed into the darkness. The sound was final, an end to the violence. Chayton, Eliza, Mara, and the townsmen stood on the stable near side, watching the ruins smolder. Bixby was on his knees. Pastor Gideon walked over, his face grim. He took a piece of rope from a rancher's saddle and bound Bixby's hands. Bixby looked up, his eyes finding Eliza. He saw the treaty in her hand. "It is just paper," he whispered, shaking. Eliza unfolded it. The heavy, embossed paper, the faded ink, the official seal. "It is," she said. "But it is heavier than your gold, Mr. Bixby." The ride back from the high trestle was slow, a grim, stumbling procession. The sun was an hour high.
and the day was already warm. Chayton was tied to his saddle, his body slumped, drifting in and out of consciousness. Eliza rode beside him, her hand on his good arm, holding him steady. Behind them, Pastor Gideon and the ranchers brought Silas Bixby, his hands bound, his face a mask of gray, silent shock. When they reached the edge of Ash Hollow, the town was waiting. The gunfire and the church bell had left a vacuum, a terrible silence. Aunt Ada was the first to see them. She stood in the ruined doorway of the Copper Daisy, her bruised face grim. She saw Chayton, saw the blood, and her expression softened. Then she saw Bixby, a prisoner, and a slow, hard look of satisfaction settled on her face. Mara, her hands blistered and black, was already tending to the rancher's wounds. They put Chayton on a cot in the back room of the saloon. "I am not a doctor," Eliza said, her voice tight, "but I can clean this." She worked for an hour, the room silent except for Chayton's sharp, indrawn breaths and her low, steady instructions. She cut away the ruined shirt, cleansed the 2 new bullet wounds with whiskey, and stitched the flesh with a clean needle and silk thread from Ada's sewing kit. He was pale as death, but his eyes never left her face. When she was done, she wrapped his shoulder and arm in clean linen. "You need to sleep," she said. "You are my breath," he whispered, his voice faint, repeating his words from the canyon, as if to remind himself. "Then sleep," she said, her voice gentle, "and breathe." He closed his eyes. Eliza walked out into the main room. The town was there, huddled, uncertain. Pastor Gideon was speaking to 2 moons. The sound of a heavy wagon and a professional team of horses cut through the quiet. A man in a dark, official coat rode into the square. He was not a local. He was tall, his face was clean-shaven, and his eyes missed nothing. A silver star was pinned to his coat. "United States Marshal Thorne," he announced, his voice carrying. "I am here on the request of a Judge Alistair Vaughn, who sent a wire from Cheyenne claiming this county was in a state of armed insurrection." He dismounted, his gaze sweeping the bullet-pocked buildings, the ruined saloon door, and the armed, exhausted ranchers. "It appears," he said, his voice dry. He was at least partially correct. "Where is Sheriff Crowley?" Jonah Pike's body had been brought back by 2 moons. They laid him beside the body of Sheriff Crowley on the boardwalk. "Crowley is there, Marshal," Pastor Gideon said, stepping forward. "He was killed resisting the will of the people." Thorne looked at the body, then at the pastor. "And the insurrection?" Eliza stepped forward. She was covered in dust and Chayton's blood. In her hand, she held the 2 treaties and the territorial seal. "There was no insurrection, Marshal," she said, her voice clear. "There was a crime. We stopped the criminal." She held out the documents. "This is the forged treaty Silas Bixby used to try and steal the Crescent Valley. This," she held up the other one, "is the legal, binding treaty of 1858, and this," she placed the heavy seal on a table, "is the tool he used to commit his fraud." Marshal Thorne looked at her, then at the documents. He recognized the seal. He unrolled the treaties. His eyes were sharp, missing no detail. Silas Bixby, his hand still bound, was shoved forward. "This is madness," Bixby rasped. "She is the criminal. She attacked my train. She is a terrorist." "She has your ledger, Mr. Bixby," Aunt Ada said, holding up the half-burned, waterlogged book that Mara had saved, the one showing the payment to Judge Vaughn. Thorne looked at the book. He looked at Bixby. He looked at the bound, silent man. "I see," the marshal said. He pulled a set of iron handcuffs from his belt. He unlocked the ropes from Bixby's wrists and replaced them with the cuffs. "Silas Bixby, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and the attempted murder of a federal judge." Bixby gaped. "Vaughn, I never—" "He ran. His wire said you had tried to assassinate him in a public square.
Thorne said, his voice cold. He is a coward, but he is a talkative one. He signed a full confession in exchange for protection. I imagine he gave you up completely. Bixby collapsed, the fight gone. Thorne turned to Eliza. These documents are evidence. They will be taken to Cheyenne. He looked at the town. A new territorial judge will be here by the end of the week, by my authority. The eviction order against the Taltsoni people is hereby suspended indefinitely. Elder Red Elk is to be released. 2 Moons and Mara ran to the jail, the key taken from Crowley's pocket. The town was quiet. The miners, who had watched this all, looked at their feet. One of them, the man who had argued with the rancher, stepped forward. He put $2 silver on the bar. "This is for Ada," he said, his voice rough. "For the door." Another man put $1 down. "This," he said, "is for the medicine, for Jonah Pike's mother." Pastor Gideon took a collection plate from the ruined church. He walked through the crowd. He did not speak of God. He spoke of the town. Within an hour, the plate was full. $130. Enough for the medicine. Enough for a decent burial. 2 days later, the town gathered on the low hill by the church. The wind was gentle. The new judge, a quiet woman from Laramie, had arrived and formally released Elder Red Elk, who now stood beside Pastor Gideon. They were burying their dead, the 2 ranchers who had fallen in the square, the Black Spur men, including the one Mara had struck, and Jonah Pike. The pastor read from his Bible, his voice carrying in the clean air. He spoke of sin and of forgiveness. He spoke of the beam in one's own eye. Then he stopped. He turned, his face open, and looked at Elder Red Elk. "We, the people of Ash Hollow," Gideon said, his voice thick, "have been blind. We sought progress, and we called it gold. We sought order, and we allowed tyranny. We have sinned against our neighbors." He bowed his head. "Elder Red Elk, on behalf of my congregation, I ask your forgiveness. We have broken the trust. We wish to begin again." Red Elk looked at the pastor. He looked at the town, the miners and ranchers standing side by side. He stepped forward. He did not speak of forgiveness. He spoke of the land. He began to sing. It was the Taltsoni song for the dead, a low, quiet chant that spoke of the journey home. It was the same song Chayton had sung in the cave. When he was finished, the silence was heavy. Then, from the back of the crowd, Aunt Ada began to sing Amazing Grace. One by one, the ranchers, the miners, and even the new judge joined in. The 2 songs, one of prayer and one of the earth, rose together in the Wyoming wind. After the funeral, Marshal Thorne walked to the front of the church. He unnailed the tattered remains of the $1,000 bounty poster for Chayton. He tore it in half and in half again, and let the pieces fall. The next day was a day for new lines. Eliza Hart unpacked her transit. The brass was bent, but Mara had heated and hammered it straight. Eliza set it up on the disputed boundary, the false line Bixby had drawn. The new judge was there. Marshal Thorne was there. Elder Red Elk and a dozen Taltsoni were there. Pastor Gideon and the town council were there. Chayton stood beside her. His arm was in a sling, his face still pale, but he was steady. "This is the false marker," Eliza announced, her voice official. She kicked the iron stake Bixby's men had driven, the true line, according to the Treaty of 1858, ratified by the United States government. She sighted through her transit, made a calculation, and walked 20 paces north. "It is here." She drove a new stake, a simple wooden marker, into the correct spot. "This is the line." The judge nodded. "So noted. The county surveyor will make it official." "And, Madam Judge." Pastor Gideon said, "It seems our county is in need of a new surveyor, one we can trust. I would like to nominate Miss Hart." The judge looked at Eliza. "Miss Hart, you have done the work. Would you accept the post to draw maps that are honest?" Eliza looked at the lines she had drawn. She looked at the Crescent Valley, its slopes peaceful in the sun. She looked at Chayton. "Yes," she said, "I would." That night, the air was cold, the first hint of autumn. Eliza found Chayton not in the town, but in the valley. He was sitting by a small, clean fire, his back against a cottonwood tree. He was home. She sat beside him. The fire crackled. For a long time, they said nothing. The fear was gone. The chase was over. The silence was full. "Your shoulder," she said. "It will heal," he replied. He was watching the flames. "The burns on my hands are worse." "Mara's hands are worse," she said with a small smile. He nodded. "She is strong, like the steel she bends." Eliza reached into her pocket. She pulled out something small. It was a single, red-tailed hawk feather, tied with a strip of sinew. "I found this," she said, "in the canyon, the day of the sandstorm. When you pulled me from the path of the black spur, it must have fallen from your pouch." Chayton looked at the feather. He touched the small medicine pouch at his neck. He had not even noticed it was gone. It had been his father's. He took it from her, his fingers, rough and burned, brushed hers. He held the feather, watching the way the firelight caught the red in it. "My father taught me," he said, his voice very low. "He said the hawk flies in the high wind. He sees the whole world. He sees the true path. He always knows where he is." He looked at her, his eyes dark, the memory of the canyon, of his raw words, between them. "Ibi Sha Nina," she whispered, testing the words. He smiled. It was a small, real smile. The heart knows the way home. He carefully tucked the feather back into his pouch. It knew its way back. She leaned her head against his good shoulder. He did not move. He did not tense. He just sat and let her. "What now, Chayton?" she asked. "Now," he said, looking at the valley. "His valley. We build—" He did not mean a house. Not yet. He meant a future. Eliza watched the fire. She thought of her maps. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to draw a line that was true. The wind was quiet. The moon began to rise, silvering the edges of the high peaks, the first light of the new day. A pale, hopeful gold touched the grass of the Crescent Valley, as if in benediction. The railroad did not come back. The breach at the high trestle was too severe, the cost of rebuilding too high, especially now that Silas Bixby's assets were frozen by federal marshals. Ash Hollow was cut off, but it was free. The new judge, a pragmatic woman named Hannah Reed, convened a meeting in the hastily repaired church. The forged treaty was held up, then formally burned in a metal bucket by Marshal Thorne. Then, Judge Reed unrolled the original treaty of 1858. "This," she announced to the crowded pews, "is the law. It has always been the law. The boundaries drawn by Miss Hart, witnessed by Elder Red Elk, are hereby the official boundaries of this county. The Crescent Valley is, and shall remain, protected Taltsoni land." A quiet fell. The miners, who sat in the back, looked defeated. Their jobs were gone with the railroad. Elder Red Elk stood, his movement slow. He did not look at the judge. He looked at the miners. "The paper is the law," he said, his voice quiet. "The land is the provider. The treaty protects our sacred valley. It does not protect the high ridges. It does not protect the deep woods." He looked at Chayton, who nodded once. "The Taltsoni will honor the boundary." Red Elk continued, "But the elk and the deer do not read maps. There is enough for all. If the hunt is wise, we propose a resolution. The sacred valley is ours. The hunting lands to the east. They will be shared. By season, by both our peoples. We will teach you how to hunt without angering the spirits. You will teach us how to live with the iron you leave behind." It was not a victory. It was a compromise. The miners, facing starvation, nodded.
The first fragile strand of a new community was woven. They were married 3 weeks later, when the aspen trees in the high valley turned a brilliant, violent gold. The ceremony was not in the church. It was held in the Crescent Valley, beneath the 2 ancient cottonwood trees that marked the entrance. The whole town was there. Aunt Ada, her face still showing the faint yellow of her bruises, had baked a dozen pies. Mara, her hands wrapped in linen to protect the terrible burns, stood as Eliza's witness. 2 moons, his usual scowl softened, stood as Chayton's. It was a wedding of 2 worlds, Pastor Gideon read from his Bible, his voice steady as he spoke of building a house upon a rock. Aunt Ada stepped forward. She did not read. She looked at Chayton, whose arm was still in a sling, and at Eliza, who wore a simple blue dress. "Love ain't," she said, her voice rough, "about soft words. It is about staying. It is about seeing the worst of a person in a canyon full of dust and gunfire. And staying. It is about holding a man while he bleeds, and staying. It is about choosing to build a home in a broken town, and staying." She smiled. "You 2, you are good at staying." Then Elder Red Elk came forward. He held a single long strip of red cloth. He did not speak of love. He spoke of duty. He took Eliza's right hand and Chayton's left. He bound their wrists together. "The blood is one," he chanted. "The breath is one. The land is one. You are bound to each other. You are bound to this valley. As the hawk returns to the nest, your hearts know the way home." He tied the knot. It was simple. It was unbreakable. The future began the next day, and it was hard work. The scars did not fade. Chayton's shoulder healed, but the winter cold brought a deep, aching pain. Mara's hands were permanently scarred, the skin tight and ridged, and she had to relearn how to hold her hammer. The town did not forget the fear, the betrayal, or the gunfire. But they were building. Eliza, now the official county surveyor, did not reopen the schoolhouse. She turned it into something new. It was a school, yes, but it was also a clinic. She taught letters and sums for 2 hours in the morning. She taught reading, not from primers, but from law books. She taught the miners, the ranchers, and the Taltsoni children how to read a land deed, how to understand a water rights claim. In the afternoons, she taught basic hygiene. She used the knowledge from her hospital days to lance infections, to set simple fractures, to dispense the quinine she had ordered from Cheyenne. She was the map woman, drawing new lines, lines of knowledge and health. Mara did not wait for the railroad. She fired up her forge and started a cooperative. She took the miners who were without work and taught them. They were miners. They knew rock and stress. She taught them how to read the iron. They did not make rails. They made horseshoes. They made plowshares for the ranchers. They made the iron fittings for new cabins. They hammered the wreckage of Bixby's train into the tools of a new life. 2 moons, the solitary scout, found he was no longer alone. The Taltsoni children, and soon the town's children, followed him. He started a scout class. He did not teach them to fight. He taught them to see. He taught them to track a deer, to read a weather front in the high clouds, to find water, to listen to the language of the birds. He was bridging the gap, teaching the new generation how to live with the land, not just on it. The winter was lean. The mine was a silent, gaping hole. There were days when the only food was the meat brought in by the shared hunting parties, but they survived. They survived on the stubbornness Aunt Ada had named. They survived on the law Eliza had proven. They survived on the community Chayton and Red Elk had forged. One evening, in the spring, Chayton and Eliza sat on the porch of the new cabin. It was small, built of fresh pine, tucked into the shelter of the valley. Mara's cooperative had built the hinges. 2 moons had shown Chayton where the trees grew straightest. He was rubbing his shoulder, the old wound aching with the damp. She sat beside him, reading a letter. He looked at her, his gaze soft in the twilight. "I remember," he said. "In the canyon, I told myself I would never let her go." Eliza looked up from her letter, a small smile on her face.
She reached out and covered his hand. "It is funny," she said. "When I was running from my past, from the Pinkertons, from the lies I had drawn, I swore I would never let any place hold me." She looked out at the valley, at the new grass pushing through the snow. "And then I came here, and I told myself the same thing. I would never let this place go, this valley, these people." He turned his hand over and laced his fingers with hers. The promise was shared. It was larger than them. It was the land itself. They rode often, in the evenings. They would ride up to the high ridge, where they had once hidden from the sandstorm. He would teach her the Tatsoni names for the stars. She would teach him the geometry that moved them. One night, she reined in her horse and rested her head against his good shoulder. She was quiet, listening. He sat still, his own horse breathing softly. She could feel the slow, steady beat of his heart, a rhythm as constant as the wind in the pines. From the valley below, faint on the air, came the sound of a drum and the low, rising chant of the Tatsoni evening song. From their own cabin, a plume of wood smoke rose, a sign of the hearth, the fire, the home they had built. They stayed that way for a long time, listening to the world they had saved. The next week, a stranger rode into Ash Hollow. He was not a miner or a rancher. He was thin, his clothes worn, his eyes desperate. He rode straight to the surveyor's office, where Eliza was drawing a new, honest map of the county. Chayton was there, leaning against the doorframe, watching her. The man dismounted. "Are you the ones?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Are you the map woman? Are you the Tatsoni warrior?" Eliza looked up. "I am Eliza Hart, the county surveyor. This is Chayton. What can we do for you?" "My name is Seth," the man said, twisting his hat in his hands. "I come from the Powder River. We heard stories. We heard you beat Silas Bixby. We heard you made the law listen." He took a deep breath. "Ma'am, we have a problem. A cattle baron from Texas. He is claiming all the water rights. He is diverting the river. He has a paper. It looks legal. But it is choking us. It is choking everyone. Settlers and Crow alike. We do not know what to do." Eliza looked at the man. She saw the same fear, the same injustice. She saw the same shadow of Bixby. She slowly began to roll up her map. She looked at Chayton. He was not smiling. His face was set. He had seen it too. The fight was over. The work was not. He pushed off the doorframe and offered his good hand to the stranger. "Come inside. Seth," Chayton said, "show us the map." "Thank you for listening to this story from Wild West Tales. Let us know where you are listening from in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and give that hype button a press so this story can be heard by more folks.